Hey everyone, I'm Christine Job of Flourish in the Foreign, and you are watching Flourish in the Foreign on YouTube. As many of you know, Flourish in the Foreign is a weekly podcast that elevates and affirms the voices and stories of Black women living and thriving abroad. It also explores living abroad as a pathway to wellness. We're talking about financial wellness, professional, mental, emotional, physical, all the wellnesses. And if you've been listening to the show, you also know that not only do we showcase Black women and their stories, but we also showcase experts who can help Black women really thrive abroad. And that is who we have today. Today we have Acquania Escarne, and she is amazing because she is an expert in financial wellness. Yes, so, Acquania Escarne is a wealth strategist who helps clients across the country build and maintain generational wealth through saving and investing. With more than a decade of experience, Acquania follows a step by step system that helps individuals and families maximize their income and leverage money they are already spending to produce residual and tax free income. Her podcast and blog, The Purpose of Money, teaches women of color about saving, investing, and building wealth through real estate, investing in the stock market, life insurance, unique savings strategies, and more. All right, so welcome, Aquania.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for just being here because, like I told everyone, not only is your expertise in financial wellness, but also you have the experience of being an expat to really give these viewers, whether they are wanting to go abroad or if they're currently abroad, the real deal about financial wellness. And I think sometimes people think of financial wellness when they're going abroad. It's just like, I'm going to move somewhere cheaper, and like that's not it. That's not it, y'all. I told Aquania before, I've been looking at some Facebook groups, and some people have been giving out some real sketchy kind of advice about what y'all should be doing financially. And I am always trying to improve my financial wellness, so I don't claim to be an expert. That's why we have Aquania to help break it down, because there is no need to go abroad and struggle just to be like, I live in Mexico. Like, why? That's not it. That's not it.
Exactly. And I know some people who have moved abroad to save money and to quote unquote live a cheaper life. And then they found that they weren't able to manage their US responsibilities, AKA student loans, while in this country living a cheaper life and potentially making less. So I think you definitely need to put some planning in place before you start to cross ponds and live abroad.
Yes, yes. So let's start from the very beginning. Can you give us like a brief kind of overview of your experience as an expat?
Of course. So I've had the fortune of living abroad 3 times. I lived in Port-au-Prince, Haiti before and after the earthquake in 2010. I've lived in Quito, Ecuador for a much shorter amount of time, about 3 months, and then 3 years in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So I would say all of them were great experiences because I got to see other countries and really explore culture, language, and all the activities that the places had to offer. But I also had the ability to take my family with me to Dubai. So I was in Quito, Ecuador, solo and dating at the time my current husband. And in Haiti, we were married but living separately because his job wasn't in Haiti. And in Dubai, we both worked abroad. So I do have the ability to speak to working abroad, and living and working abroad with kids.
And I love that. Now, y'all know that obviously Aquani is going to be on the podcast. So we're going to get into all of that because that is so, so important. But for this YouTube, we're going to stick to financial wellness. And I want to ask you, Aquania, how did you prepare yourself to go abroad financially? And how did you manage your own funds and things like that?
That's a great question. So I am a little special in that my job is what led me to living abroad. They are the ones who found, well, I helped find the place. They helped me move and they helped me facilitate having a job on the other end. But my husband was in the private sector and he still is. And he had to do a little bit more creative work to make it work for us. But he also was able to find an abroad opportunity through his current employer, and he took what we call a sabbatical from the US office in order to go work in the foreign office abroad. But the advice can still be applicable to anyone who's thinking about this. So, some of the things we did was we started a year in advance. Before we even packed one bag and got on anybody's plane, we were planning. So, in that year before departure, we solidified where we were going to live and how we wanted to live. And we got a good estimate of how much we were going to make when we got to our other destination. We thought about what would be best for our finances, whether it be to rent our house or to sell it. And at that time, it made the most sense to rent it. So then we also, about 3 months before departure, prepared our home for it to be viewed and shown so that we could rent it successfully by the time we departed. And then we also thought through, what are some of the things that we definitely don't want to have to deal with when we're gone, such as storage. So we sold a lot of things that we knew we would not want to use or come back to when we came back to the States. But if there were any family heirlooms that were very valuable to us, we decided to give those to other family members for safekeeping. And then the things that we wanted to take with us so it would feel like home abroad, those are the things we shipped and packed.
So tell me, this is a big question I always see in the Facebook groups. I mean, it is without a doubt, I think, a really important question for people to ask, but the responses are all over the place. They're just shambles. And I'm always like, I can't deal with this. So people want to know, how much money should they have saved if they want to go abroad? How do they determine what that number is? And how do they go about actually enacting a savings plan?
That's a great question, too. So I think it depends on your personal situation and how do you want to live abroad? Because I've been abroad with Peace Corps volunteers who have sometimes a very thin budget and they're able to provide what they need for themselves. Whereas at my last time abroad, I was with a family, right? So I had very different needs than someone who's single. But my rule of thumb is you should try to save at least 3 to 6 months of savings, just like if you were at home, based on what you think you're going to need. So a lot of this research, thanks to Google, is out there on the internet. You can get a good sense of the average cost of housing where you're trying to go. And then you can also find out whether or not you're going to work abroad on the local economy. And if so, do the employers normally cover housing, or are you going to be expected to cover that expense yourself? So, for example, in Haiti, a lot of times you could work for a local NGO or a local company, but you would be expected to pay your housing costs. Whereas in Dubai, everybody who's an expat there, if you're working for another company, which you had to have some status to be there, your housing was normally completely covered by your employer or through a stipend that was given to you. So you knew that you could choose to live somewhere within the stipend amount, right? So if you're going to a place where housing is covered, then maybe your savings doesn't need to include that amount, but you will want to include money for food, money for any other expenses you may be expected to pay, such as utilities. If you're not going to have public transportation, you may want to save money for you to buy a car or some type of transportation while you get there. And then having money to travel if one of your goals is to travel from where you are. But think about that number by doing your research. Researching the country. Is it an expensive place? Obviously, the budget for someone moving to London is going to be very different for someone moving to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, right? They're just very different countries to live in and much, much different expenses. But I would start with that. And the reason I say that is because some countries will require that you show proof of income or finances in order to support your stay in the event you are going there and you plan to look for employment after arrival. And I forgot, I also lived in Italy for a year. I lived in Bologna, Italy, and Italy was one of those places where I was going there as a graduate student, but I still had to prove that I had income to support my studies because I wasn't going to be working while I was a student. So it really depends on the context in which you're going abroad and what you plan to do. But once you get a budget, then you can save 3 to 6 months of that budget. And I would save for living abroad just like any other savings goal. People save for a house, a car, or any major expense if they're good about it consistently and with every paycheck. So decide what you can afford to save. If it's 10% per paycheck, save that much. If it's more, push yourself to save more. And then any bonuses, any birthday money, anytime you get extra income, use that extra income to put towards the saving goal and actually put it somewhere where you can see it. So you're motivated to save towards this goal and you always know where you are. So that way, maybe other people can support you. So if they see your savings chart for your year abroad in Spain, for example, and then your birthday's coming up, maybe instead of buying you a gift card, they'll give you money towards your travel. So your travel fund. So I think that's the best way to do it. And in my finances, I save for my next vacation all the time anyway, with every paycheck. So in your case, it would be your move abroad fund.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so let's get into another major question. A lot of people feel like if you go abroad, you gotta just sell all your things and just be gone forever. And it's like you don't have to do that. You can literally choose how you decide to go abroad. And a big thing is that do they sell, this amazing asset of having a home, or do they rent it out? And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
I think it really depends on what your bigger goal is, right? So, if your goal is to have passive income through real estate and your home could potentially be your first rental, then maybe you approach it with the idea to rent it because you want to come back from living abroad at some point and potentially buy more homes to rent. But if you're a person who doesn't like dealing with tenants and toilets, or you don't want to pay a property manager to manage the home for you and give them a percentage of the rental fees, then maybe it's a good time for you to sell. It really just depends on your market and what it is that you're able to do. So for us, my husband bought his first house at the height of the market in 2006. And then in 2008, most of you know, a lot of people were underwater on their mortgages. So he wasn't really in a position when we did go to Dubai in 2012 to sell it, right? We owed more on the house than the current market was going to provide. And we did want to create passive income through real estate investing. So for us, it was a no brainer. Let's just put it on the market. We lived in a good neighborhood with schools, shopping, and a very attractive life for single and married people. So we knew that it was a great rental property and it's still rented today. We have never moved back to that house since 2012. We have a tenant in it who's paying the mortgage down, and we do get that passive income through the rent. But renting and being a landlord is not for everyone. As a real estate investor, I have learned that for myself and I have figured out what I'm willing to do. So what I would say is if you're going to move abroad, I would invest in a property manager. They do take a percentage of the rent, but if you are in a significant different time zone than where your house is located, it's going to be worth its weight in gold to hire someone else to get that 3 a.m. call about a busted pipe or a broken air conditioner because you don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night to handle something you can't actually fix right away, right? And you're going to end up calling contractors or someone else. However, if you are in a position where renting it out, you're only going to be able to get enough rent to cover the mortgage, and you really don't have or want to spend the money on a property manager, then I would say, okay, prepare yourself to self-manage from abroad. And some tips for that are making sure to have a contractor on call that you can get to go to the house whenever something happens. Have someone who's willing to randomly, occasionally check on the property to make sure the tenants are keeping up their responsibilities, whether it's taking out the trash on the days it's supposed to be taken out, or managing the outside or inside of the property so there's no significant damages. But you're going to need a team. If it's at a minimum, you're going to need a contractor, but if possible, people who can be a little bit more involved. It's a touchy subject as to whether or not you tell the tenant you're abroad. I've had some who've been honest about that, and therefore the tenant knows the right times to call when there's something happening. But I've also had owners who have decided not to disclose that information because they just don't want their business out there like that. But they found ways to still communicate through email, through telephone when it's necessary. The other tip that I would give is creating a lease that leaves some responsibility on the tenant to manage the home. So sometimes you can work out with a tenant that if the expense is $100 or less to repair, then you go ahead and take care of it and then subtract that from the next month's rent. But if it's $100 or more, then I'll take care of it and I'll make sure to provide contractors to come look at it within a certain amount of business days so that that issue is taken care of immediately. So those are things you can negotiate in your lease so that you don't have to deal with the small issues, and then you are aware of the big ones too.
I love that. I love that. So now I have to ask you, what is your opinion on living off that rental income versus investing it? Because I know some people are like, I'm gonna put a tenant in there and I'm gonna move to, I don't know, Costa Rica, and I'm gonna live off of that. What are your thoughts on that?
It could work, but I still think you need a savings because as a landlord, I have seen there's good times where your tenant will pay their rent on time religiously, and you'll have the greatest tenant for 2 years straight. And then there's perfect people who have life happen and something goes awry. So I've had great tenants who lost their jobs, and all of a sudden they went from the perfect paying tenant to the one who missed rent or was a couple days late or had to be evicted. I've had to do evictions before. They're never fun, whether you're out of state or out of country. And therefore, you have to be prepared for the moments where the rent doesn't come. What is your plan? So that's why even if you plan to live off the rental income, which is never a bad idea, I know plenty of people, that is their retirement plan. They're buying a lot of properties while they're working. And then in retirement, that cash flow is going to sustain or supplement their retirement income. So it is a plan that works, especially if during your working years, a tenant is paying off the mortgage. So you're also not having to pay off the mortgage the bank gave you for the property. It's a win-win, but you do need savings. And when it comes to rentals, a couple of quick tips: have a separate bank account for the rental income. Do not try to commingle it with your finances. It should be maintained and managed as a business because you want to be able to write off some of those expenses as a business. And then the second thing is having 1 to 2 months of the rent saved in a savings account for that property. And that savings account could be utilized to cover a missed mortgage payment or to cover a missed month's rent. It could also be used to cover repairs. Always contribute to the savings account for your rental because even if you buy a brand new home, it's going to eventually have repairs or some other need. And you want to make sure that you are saving for that. And lastly, I would say know the rules for where you live. So our rental property in Maryland, for example, when we lived in it, we weren't aware that the county requires you to have a license to rent out to someone else so that they're aware that you're getting rental income. And you need to renew that license every year. So those are things that you want to also include in your savings so that when the license is due to be renewed, the money is there. So some people think I can spend all the rent because this is cash flow. And I'm saying, no, you can't. You need to budget that money just like you would your personal finances. And you need to make sure the expenses for the property are able to be covered by the rent you're charging. If they're not, you either need to revisit the rent and consider raising it once the new tenant agreement is in place. So 2% is the average increase in rent when you're with the same person. But if you're going to change tenants, that's a good time to reevaluate. Should you raise the rent even more.
This is so, so good. This is so, so good. So, I mean, as you know, people go abroad at different stages in life doing different things, right? From someone who's right out of college or grad school. Here in Spain, there's this program called Auxiliar de Conversación. Basically, you're a teaching assistant. You get like a 700 euro stipend, and you're just out here, living and doing stuff. And, you have people who come for mid career uh, changes and things like that, and people who are retiring. But I think something that happens somehow, or maybe it's not, maybe it's just some people I've encountered, there's somehow like a disconnect, not from reality, but like sometimes of goals. Because when you're trying to make it abroad, you're very much in the present moment, and sometimes you're not thinking about the future because you're like, I'm just trying to speak Spanish today, or I'm just trying to do this, like I'm just trying to make it happen. And people go by year, and they are maybe making the same money, especially if you're maybe here in Spain, if you're on the Spanish economy, you're not making that much money. So I say all of that to say is, what are your do's and don'ts for investing abroad? Because of I don't see a lot of people talking about investing abroad who haven't already been investing while they're in the States, or who aren't older. So when I'm thinking about it, a lot of the women I've been talking to, who went abroad after grad school, stuff like that, like they aren't thinking about it because they're just in survival mode. So what are your do's and don'ts for investing?
I think everyone needs a financial plan, no matter how much money you're making, just as much as you should be budgeting so that you know where your money's going. Investing and saving should be a part of your budget. I'm a huge advocate of that. If it's not in the budget, it's not a priority. So you do need to think about it. And I think what some people fail to realize is when they're living their best life abroad and they're hanging out with locals, those locals have opportunities you don't. They have potentially a federal or a government retirement or pension that they're going to qualify for, which is equivalent to our Social Security. If you decide to spend the rest of your days in Spain, and you're going there before you actually retire, those are years you're not paying into Social Security, and you don't qualify for that country's pension plan or other benefits. And these people do. So you need to make up your own plan, whether it be investing in individual retirement accounts so that you are saving for your own future. You do need to make income to invest in those accounts. And so if you're making an income that qualifies you for the Roth individual retirement account, which we call an IRA, go ahead, contribute to that. But you are limited to $6,000 a year if you're under the age of 50. And then over the age of 50, you can do catch-up contributions with an extra 1,000. But that's just like only a little bit of money each year that hopefully will grow over time. But if you're trying to invest more than that, then it really depends on what is your status abroad. So some people are digital nomads or entrepreneurs, and they may have the flexibility to do self-directed individual retirement accounts or SEP, which is like a self-employed plan, where you can contribute $18,000, $19,000 a year. So in those circumstances, it really depends on where you are financially, what you can afford to do. But those are some ways that you can open up accounts and save for your future, and understand that you don't necessarily qualify for the same benefits as everyone else around you. But that is a good thing to research, because it depends. Because in the US, for example, we have foreigners who work here and they're paying into Social Security just like everyone else. And they do qualify if they work long enough for the benefits for our access to the Social Security benefits. So some countries will say, no, you never qualify, you're not a resident. Others will say, if you paid into the system, you can take out of the system. So it really just depends on your status and what your goals are. But no matter how you do it, you should always be putting a portion of what you make into your savings goals and into investments that will grow over time with you. And so that's my rule of thumb, is always do it, set an amount. Hopefully, if your income increases, increase the amount. One of the things I noticed that some people will save the same amount for 20 years straight, but their income has increased. That's not serving you, right? If you're making more money, you should be saving and investing more money, period. And that's going to help you more in the long run. So, those are just some tips. How you invest really depends on you and your comfort level. I know some people choose to do individual stocks. I would actually recommend you do diversified portfolios that have a lot of companies in them, but they're not specifically picking one company. You know, we have the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think the same goes for investing. If you have money and you want to buy individualized stocks, that should be a bonus to your investments that are in mutual funds or exchange traded funds that have low fees but more diversification. That way you can experience gains across the market and through different industries.
Are there any excuse me? Are there any accounts that you recommend, particularly for expats, whether it be like a high yield savings account or different types of investment accounts? Are there any that you recommend?
Definitely go to bankrate.com. That's my source for to see who's offering the best rates and the best deals. I am a huge advocate of a high yield savings account, but when the market is down and the Fed has lowered interest rates, you're not going to earn the 1% or more interest rate that you do in a good market. And we've seen that this year for a fact. But that doesn't mean you give up on saving. It just means you might have to do a little more research to figure out who's offering the best rate at the time and whether or not you should move your money to get that greater interest. Because savings is something I don't expect you to spend every day or even every month, you should be earning as much interest as you can on money that's sitting in the bank, right? But you have to decide, you know, how much do you want to put into effort of looking up interest rates every 3 to 6 months and moving your money to whoever's offering the best deal. I am always checking interest rates because, again, it's money sitting in the bank. I want to earn the most money on my money. But I also look for signing bonuses. And I know in the beginning of this year, Ally was offering, for example, a bonus to existing and new customers. So look for deals where you can get cash. It was up to $250 for opening up a specific account if you were an existing or a new customer, and they would pay out that bonus within 6 months or so of you opening the account and funding it. And you only needed $1 to get started. For me, those are no brainers. I have a savings account where I have my 3 to 6 months where I'm saving. But if I can put a couple of dollars into this other account and get $250 for my effort, I'm going to move some of my dollars into this new account and take the free bonus, right? And the high interest rate if I can. It's always great when you could get both, but it really just depends on what's being offered. So I start my search at bankrate.com and I look at who's offering the best interest rates on money market accounts and high yield savings accounts. And then depending on the interest rates, go with the one that's best for you. As far as other types of accounts you should have, I just talked about retirement. A lot of them end in the IRA, so individual retirement accounts, but Roth is only for those who make a certain income, and traditional are for those who make over that income. So those are two ways to save for retirement and what types of accounts you should have in your portfolio if you can. And then entrepreneurs have so many more options because they're encouraged to save through their business and allow the business to also get a deduction for contributing to a retirement account in addition to the person contributing to retirement. So entrepreneurs can definitely look at solo 401ks or the self-directed IRA or even some other accounts out there for entrepreneurs only.
And do you have a recommendation for a good US bank account that works well internationally? Because also, what's been interesting this year is that there is apparently a number of American citizens who decided to go abroad and close their American bank accounts, which I was just baffled about. And then when the stimulus check came, which it did come, I got it direct deposit. And people were like, how are they going to cut us a check? And then how do I cash it in Spain or wherever they are? And I was just like, what?
So I don't recommend closing US bank accounts. I don't think closing US bank accounts will make you suddenly exempt from any taxes that you have to pay as a US citizen. And I think people think that, and that's why they take those drastic actions, but that's not the case. If you never, ever, ever plan on coming back, okay, maybe you do evaluate that differently. But most people don't know, especially on the first time out, if that's what they're going to love or if that's what they're going to hate, right? So I would not close bank accounts unless the bank is no longer serving you. What I would do though is you can also start at bankrate.com for this too, is looking at banks that offer you either the ability to take out fees through ATMs with no fee, or that offer you no foreign transaction fees or some type of benefit so that when you're abroad, you're not paying extra to access your money. There are a few banks out there. I can name them, but they won't necessarily apply to everyone. So, for example, USAA is a great bank, but it mostly serves those in the military and some government employees who also live abroad, like foreign service officers, aka diplomats. You can have a USAA account. They don't have the ATM fees, and they'll reimburse you for any fees you do incur, and they don't have foreign transaction fees either on their credit cards, right? So that's a great bank, but not doesn't apply to everyone. Credit unions are a great place to start. Credit unions are not-for-profit banking institutions that are managed and run by the members, right? So they have little to no fees. They normally try to cater to their audience. So if you are eligible for that credit union relationship, you can ask them, what are some of the benefits that you offer to its members? Do you have no foreign transaction fees? Do you have lower credit card fees? Most credit unions do offer credit cards that are at much lower fees than store cards. So it's always better to get a credit card from a credit union than a Macy's, for example. Macy's is probably going to have a 24 point something interest rate, whereas a credit union's average interest rate is 5 to 7%. So if you're going to have a credit card and use it abroad, which I recommend because it's easier to report misuse and not have your bank account impacted, then why pay more interest on a card if you don't have to? Why pay foreign transaction fees on a card if you don't have to? But if you do decide, I don't have a relationship with a credit union, or I don't have the qualifications to get a bank account with Navy Federal or USAA or some other bank like that, then I would start to look at companies that offer you no foreign transaction fees and other perks, like some of the airline credit cards, for example, will give you triple miles, no foreign transaction fees, and a moderate interest rate depending on your credit, right? You might pay a higher interest rate, but the points you earn on your flights or the travel that you do from that country could potentially help you pay for other travel expenses. So it might be better for you in the long run to take advantage of that. The only thing I have to say is just be careful of the annual fees to renew those cards. Most of them have a fee, and you want to know what that fee is. You don't want to be surprised by it, and you also don't want to forget to pay it. Because for me, I'm someone who doesn't carry credit card debt, but I have cards that have annual fees. And if you don't remember that, when the fee hits and you're not paying on that bill because you didn't expect it to have a balance, you're going to end up paying a late fee or interest on an annual renewal. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I've kind of written down what cards have fees, when do they renew, and I make sure to take that into account when I'm doing my budgeting for that credit card.
I love that. I have to ask you because, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of people are abroad, they're entrepreneurs and they're digital nomads. Do you have any advice for credit cards that are great for entrepreneurs while they're abroad?
I think they're pretty much the same. If it's good for the person, it's probably good for the entrepreneur. But again, do your research and see what works for you. I really think entrepreneurs, as an entrepreneur myself, my favorite credit card for my business has been Capital One Spark. I'm not endorsing them. They're not paying me to say that, but I do like the fact that I do get cash back on my business purchases, and I've been able to use that cash back to pay down the balance on the bill. So that's always a great win-win when my money helps me pay off more of my expenses. But there are other cards that are coming up to give their benefits or increase their benefits to their customers, and they may have similar programs. So look for cash back, look for business credit cards. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, you want to establish your own business credit over time. That may be difficult to do if you're just starting out, but there are some credit card companies that will give you a business credit card in your business name and allow you to be the guarantor, which means you are promising to pay if your business income is not able to pay it. But that's a great way to start building business credit. And then again, the cashback is icing on the cake because that's money towards your future or current expenses to lower your bills, and it's money you earned just by using your card. So that's a great way to kind of save yourself some money in the long run.
So tell me, because this is something that a lot of people don't think about as well. And it's just funny because, when I went abroad, I don't think I was like the most well prepared, but I had thought about some things. I had thought about some things. And then I was a quick learner to be like, all right, we need to like readjust some stuff. But I wonder if you could speak to the tax implications of going abroad, because being an American, most of the listeners and viewers are probably American. If you're not American, I apologize. Let me know where you're from, and I will get someone specialized where you're from, and we'll talk about it. But being American is quite unique because our income is taxed globally. Like, we have to report at the very least. You may not owe, but we must report. And a lot of people forget that. Like, they just disconnected and they just forget about those kinds of things. So I wonder if you could speak to the tax implications of going abroad.
Okay, so yes, I am not a tax expert. So please know this is my experience, but this is my advice based on my experience. Okay. Yes, you will owe taxes or need to file taxes. And it is always better to file, even if you owe, than to file late. Okay. Because when you file late, you have penalties and interest. When you file on time, at least they don't come after you for the extra late fee because you filed on time, but you still may incur interest until you pay your bill. Bottom line is, depends on your job and your state. I'm a U.S. government employee. My 9 to 5 is covered by the U.S. taxpayers' dollars. I will always have a state that I'm connected to where I owe state taxes, and I will always pay federal taxes, period, because I'm a U.S. government employee. My husband, however, in the private sector, when we were both in Dubai, he was considered an American citizen working abroad, and he got a foreign income tax credit. So he could earn a certain amount of money. At that time, it was like $93,000 a year without it all being taxable. It was only above that amount that was taxable. So he got a couple of tax breaks. But our state being Maryland, we always owed Maryland something or had to file with Maryland something, right? But if you're from a state that has no income tax, Florida, Texas, for example, you don't necessarily have your income tax, but you still may have your home that's in the U.S. tax, because resident real estate taxes are real and you do need to pay them, or you might be subject to losing your house. So my rule of thumb is do the research, know what your state is, because, for example, California is not a tax-free state when it comes to income, but they do give their residents a benefit where if you are out of the country for a certain amount of days a year, you may be entitled to lower taxes or getting all of your taxable income paid back to you because you weren't in the state of California long enough for them to keep it, right? New York has a similar policy. Again, you're normally taxed in New York for your income, but if you're out of the state for a certain amount of days a year, they will also return your taxable income, right? So know the rules of your state. And then if worst case scenario, hire a CPA if you have a complicated situation and you're just not sure. And so the really cool thing is when you go to a place with a lot of other expats, you will learn that a lot of them have resources that they've been utilizing way longer than you, and they can give you some feedback. So when we lived in Dubai, we asked around, like, does anyone have a accountant or a CPA you use to do your US taxes? And believe it or not, they were like, yeah, we all use this company in Qatar. So not even in the United Arab Emirates, in another country in Qatar was an excellent CPA who did all the expats taxes, did a great job on ours, helped us file on time, and helped us get the numbers right. So ask around in the expat community as to who somebody may be using. If not, if you're not able to find someone in the community, then definitely go back to your US network and see if there's anyone who has experience with helping those who are living abroad. I think that's key. Not all CPAs have this niche and they won't all get it right. So you want to make sure whoever you consider that they have experience with someone who's earned foreign income and qualifies for the tax credits, or someone who has dealt with people who made income in the US and abroad in the same year or something like that, because it does matter and it could be different.
Yes, yes. People pay your taxes, please, or at least file your taxes.
File
You
your
know,
taxes.
like
Yes. Pay them too if you owe, but let's file because we know what tax dollars do for us. They pay our teachers and our first responders, and they keep the roads paved. And even when you're not here, you're going to want that stuff done, because if you have rental property here, you want that rental property to appreciate. And the best way is to maintain the communities, right? And so don't think just because you skipped out to live abroad that you got to skip out on your civic duties either. And that includes voting. And a lot of people don't realize you can vote from abroad. You can be someone who submits an absentee ballot, especially for major elections that you want to be a part of. So don't think just because you don't live in the US anymore, you don't have any responsibilities to the US anymore. That is not necessarily the case.
yes, 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 yes. Voting, please, people, please, please. It's really easy. It's really easy. They send it straight to your house. So, um, I wanted to ask your opinion and your advice for those that are watching or listening that want to really build wealth while they're abroad, generational wealth. And I guess let's assume they're starting at zero. Maybe they're coming out of grad school, or maybe they decide to hightail it out of the States on a dream and a wish. And now they're like, well, I need to actually live. So, what would be your advice?
I think you should take advantage of the savings first. My husband and I, living 3 years abroad, having our housing paid for by our employers, and not having the largest chunk of our budget coming out of our monthly income was what we saved first, because we had our house rented in the US. We made the tenants' rent cover the mortgage. So we weren't trying to pay Peter, pay Paul, and then see what's left over. We were like, no, we're running the rental like a business. The bank account that the rent goes into is the bank account that the mortgage comes out of, period. But we pretended like we were still paying our mortgage, right? Because that is the easiest money to identify. My salary didn't change just because I moved abroad. My husband's salary did, but he still was making income. And so we could still budget for that, right? So what we paid for our mortgage in the US is what we saved every month when we were abroad. And then taking into consideration a few things that would change for us, like food costs more in Dubai because most of it's imported. They don't grow as many fruits and vegetables in country. So we had to increase our food budget, but not by the same extent as the mortgage we used to pay. We weren't eating that much food, right? So that's where I would start. Whatever expenses you suddenly don't have anymore, those should be instant areas where you should be able to save. If you already have your 3 to 6 month savings before you left, because that's the advice I gave before, then you definitely can afford to take that money and invest it in the stock market, invest it in retirement accounts, or other things you may be interested in. I know plenty of people who have saved down payments abroad and then come back on vacations and purchase rental properties. So it really depends on what you're interested in. Like I said, being a landlord is not for everyone, but it is a great way to build wealth if you want that passive income, if you want houses that you can pass down to your family's next generation. But I've had people who like don't want to own real estate. That's not their thing. They want to be more passive. So if you are a digital nomad, you probably have a blog or some type of platform or service. Maybe that platform could include affiliate marketing. That's a way to make money and sell other people's products to your audience without having to hold inventory or any type of product that you actually have to get to a customer. And that's a way to make passive income that you could invest. I also know that there's passive real estate opportunities. So like, for example, I recently purchased ownership in a hotel. I don't have to manage the hotel. I am not making sure employees show up to work, and I don't make sure the sheets are changed. But there is a property manager who does all of that. And all I had to do was invest capital. And the capital that I invested was money I saved. So you can build up your savings and then choose to do passive investing, and whatever the product gives you, you get. Like in hotel industry, you get dividends every quarter based on the profits of the revenue of the hotel. In stocks, if you get stocks that pay dividends, you're going to get a dividend check whenever the dividends are paid out, normally also once a quarter. If you do affiliate marketing, you're going to get paid every time you sell someone else's product. So there's different ways in which you can make money and reinvest that money into assets that generate more money. So those are just some ideas. And a lot of that is easier to do because you've budgeted, you've saved before you went abroad, and you've dropped some expenses, right? So you know what you can afford to save.
I love this. We could talk about this all the time because it's so important. I think for anyone who's going abroad, but I'm going to just be even more specific for Black women to be able to go abroad. And I really see going abroad, it is a pathway to wellness. It's a way to be able to experience different culture, different lifestyle. You're maybe not under the same systemic pressures, or you have the same kind of assumptions, because as a foreigner, you get a lot of room. People are just like, you're a foreigner. So you're not really obligated sometimes to necessarily fall into some societal norms. Obviously, always be respectful, but there's a lot of space, there's a lot of freedom to really cultivate a life well lived on your own terms and whatever that means to you. But let's be frank, like financial wellness is the foundation. There's no, it doesn't make any kind of sense to come from one situation that you're unhappy with, you're stagnant or whatever, and go somewhere else in a foreign place that you may not know the language, know anybody, and like endure or struggle. That makes no sense.
And I don't think you can. There are some countries that are like, if you don't have a purpose here in which you will have income, you can't be here. Like UAE is very strict. You have to have a work visa beyond, I think it's 90 days. So you can visit for 90 days, but on the 91st, no, not even, I think it's 30 days. So in the UAE, you could visit for 30 days, but on the 31st day, if you don't have a work permit, you're out, or you're crossing the border. A lot of people would go to Oman, come back, go to Oman, come back, because they didn't have a status there. So know the rules where you are. There are other places in the Caribbean, for example, if you purchase a property, they'll consider you a resident. Okay, so now are you going to do what you can save so you can purchase a home in said country and then retire there? I'm not saying retiring abroad is not possible. It's just you need to know what the rules are. And for some countries, because they don't want you to be a burden on society, they're going to want you to prove that you can afford to be there. So they're going to show me your receipts, show me your bank balances, show me that you have the income to cover your expenses, and pay for X insurance so you can also cover your medical if something happens. Because in some countries, they have a system where the medical care is free to the residents, but you have to pay as a foreigner. So know what those rules are and make sure your finances can support what you're trying to do. Because that's really what it comes down to. And like I said, there are some countries that they're not even about it. If you don't have a purpose, you're out. You know, in the UAE, once you lost your job, quit your job, and didn't find another one, you had a certain amount of days to exit the country too. So some people take this very seriously, and you need to make sure you know what the rules are and follow those rules, because you don't want to jeopardize your ability to return to a country either.
Yes, I agree. I think what COVID has shown us in the entire world is like, okay, yeah, you can move around freely, but now, you know, a lot of these countries, I'll say specifically Southeast Asia, I think they're being like, no more of this digital nomad. You hopping in, you hopping out. Y'all gonna need to really apply for a legit visa, show the receipts, as you said, and purchase private insurance. Not just being
Mhm.
like, I'm just gonna go to Bali and use up the insurance, the public health, and it's just, it makes sense. You have to contribute. Rent and food and whatever activities is fine for the local economy, but I think what COVID has shown us is that there's going to be probably a clamp down on the whole digital nomading,
Mhm.
bouncing
But maybe
around.
for a little bit until, the vaccine is out there and people are like, "We're good, we're cool now. Let's do this." So,
All
we'll
right, so I
see.
was wondering if you could give some just rapid fire advice for the listeners. I always tell people, there's different stages to this: getting abroad, staying abroad, and thriving abroad. What would be your financial wellness tips for people getting abroad, staying, and thriving?
So, getting abroad, do your research, try to figure out as much of your budget as you can, and save at least 3 months of your money before you get there. Do your research too. Pick a handful of countries, maybe explore a couple of them each day, each week, and then narrow it down to your top three and make a choice that you can live with. And then give yourself 6 months to a year to really figure it out, because it takes about 6 months to get settled. And you don't want to quit when you're just starting out on your journey. Everyone's going to have adjustment periods, but do your research to know what the requirements are to live there and to get there. Staying abroad, if you like what you're doing, make sure you're doing it right, saving and investing as much of the income you do make in ways that you can, whether it be in US markets or investment accounts that you open, whether it be as an entrepreneur or as an American citizen who's just working, right? Um, and what was the last one? Thriving abroad, right? So definitely I would kind of rank what are your goals for this experience, and what is it that you're going to allow yourself to do in order to get the most out of it. So I think it's a mindset. I think when you get there, you need to know this is not America anymore. Okay. So opening your mindset to saying yes to things you might not normally have said yes to, trying foods you never would have tried before. That is how you're going to thrive. Getting to know the culture and embracing it, and really trying to learn the language is how you're going to really take this experience to the next level. And I feel like some people are not prepared for that. They get abroad, they want McDonald's, they want Starbucks to be open 24/7, they want cafes. If you didn't choose a cosmopolitan city that offers any of that, it's not going to be there, right? Port-au-Prince, Haiti didn't have a Starbucks, didn't have a McDonald's. They had great places to eat and they had late night places, but they were like Haitian food, different culture, different concept. You need to be able to understand that and accept it for what it is, right? Embrace that change, but then also understand that change, right? So for some people, it'll make you appreciate McDonald's and Starbucks when you come back home for vacations. For other people, it's what they've always been looking for, and they don't need that 24/7 access to food and cafes. They want that laid back culture and that really good home cooked food with natural spices. It just depends on what you're looking for. But I think if you don't go in with that mindset, you'll be miserable. It could be paradise and you'll find something that you don't like about it, right? So you have to decide that you're going to be open and accept and do whatever comes to you.
Yes, I think that's amazing advice because let's just be honest, people. It's very rarely the country or the city. It's always you. It's always you. So let's just get
That,
honest about what you want in the first place.
yes.
Acquania, you are the host and the co-host of two podcasts. I'm wondering if you could please tell us about those.
Absolutely. So I host the Purpose of Money podcast, which is a podcast where we talk about how to build generational wealth $1 at a time. I normally share entrepreneurship stories from women who are building wealth or finding ways to create more freedom in their life. I also co-host the Millennial Wealth Builders series with Danielle Desir, who is the host of the Thought Card, a travel and financial savvy podcast. We together have created this series that right now is scheduled to be 12 months. Um, 12 months, one episode per month, released on the first of every month, where we share ways to build wealth that you can do, right? And we're sharing these wealth building stories to help women create more income for themselves, because we learned that when it comes to people of color, we're not getting equal pay, but we're expected to build generational wealth with the same amount of money, right? So we're making less, but we're expected to build more and exceed our peers. How do we do that? And a lot of times it's through entrepreneurship or creative thinking on how we use our money. So we've been doing episodes to highlight women who started with nothing or dealt with economic struggles or financial problems, and were able to take that scenario and turn it around into multi-million dollar businesses in some cases, or just comfortable financial relationships with them and their money that allowed them to provide more to their family. So check it out. We are a podcast that's been given a grant from the Plutus Foundation. So we have someone behind us who's already believed in this and is helping to fund the cost of the podcast as well.
And tell us about your financial services that you provide.
Absolutely. So I am a financial wellness coach, a wealth strategist, and a life insurance producer who helps women and men. I have clients that cover both, build the wealth that they're looking for, and normally just by reallocating money they're already spending. So it's not always about making more money. It's sometimes about spending the money we make differently. And I help you figure out what that is and how to do it. I have clients that are abroad and I have clients that are in the US, but we meet right now over Zoom to help figure out what you need, how to meet your financial goals. And I'm already booking for 2021. So please, if you're interested in working with me, just reach out to me on thepurposeofmoney.com or on social media. I'm on Instagram at The Purpose of Money and Twitter at @purpose_money.
All right. I mean, y'all, if you guys didn't get something from this, I just don't know. I just don't know. This has been a fantastic, fantastic conversation. And clearly, if you guys have been paying attention, you probably have even more and more questions. So definitely hit up Acquania, because we're trying to get financially well or maintain our financial wellness. It's just like physical wellness, it's just like mental wellness, right? This is a holistic approach to life and to living abroad. We have to cater to each section of our life to make sure that we are fully, fully well, living a life of our own design. It's about taking back power. It's about being really free, for real. So thank you so much, Acquania, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait until we record a full episode for the podcast, because that's going to be dope. But anyway, thank you all for watching this here on YouTube, or maybe listening to it. I don't know. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure that you are subscribed to this YouTube channel. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me how you feel. What did you take from this? And of course, be sure to tune in to the Flourish in the Foreign podcast. It is, of course, a weekly podcast that is all about elevating and affirming the voices and stories of Black women living and thriving abroad. We are exploring living abroad as a pathway to wellness. So definitely give it a check. Definitely check it out. Check out our website at www.flourishintheforeign.com for all resources about getting, staying, and thriving abroad. All right. Until next time, bye.